We're returning to motions and resolutions. Mr. Calderon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 97, I request unanimous consent to re-refer file item 102, AB 2339, Irwin, to the Appropriations Committee.
Without objection. Mr. McCarty, you're recognized for your guest introduction.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to recognize the association working with our school bus drivers. The California Association of School Transportation Officials are in the back of the chambers. We have school superintendents, bus drivers, and individuals that work in this important field. Let's please welcome them to our state capitol.
Returning now to file item 77, Mr. Wood, are you prepared to take up your item? Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1808 by Assemblymember Wood, an act relating to minors.
Mr. Wood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Presenting AB 1808. Currently, marriage and family therapists, clinical counselors, and their associated interns can provide services to minors in certain circumstances. Unfortunately, marriage and family therapist trainees and clinical counselor trainees are currently ineligible to provide these services. This lack of consistency creates both a lack of available services for our youth and a lack of opportunities for trainees that need to complete 3,000 hours of counseling before they are eligible to sit for a licensing exam. AB 1808 simply adds marriage and family therapist trainees and professional clinical counselor trainees to the list of providers eligible to provide services to minors over the age of 12. Trainees will be under the supervision of a licensed supervisor, must be enrolled and have completed 12 semester units in a qualified graduate program. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire vote. Clerk will close the row and tally the vote. Ayes 71, noes 0. Measure passes. File item 78, AGR 32, Alejo. Mr. Alejo, are you prepared? Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 32 by Assemblymember Alejo, relative to United States Supreme Court nominations.
Mr. Alejo, you may open on your resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AGR 32 calls upon the United States Senate to fulfill its constitutional obligations. I want to take a moment to say that the recent passing of Justice Antonin Scalia is a loss to American jurisprudence, although I did not always agree with his decisions or reasoning. But a well-functioning federal government, as well as state governments, require a fully manned and functional U.S. Supreme Court. In the 2 months since Justice Scalia's death, there have been high-profile cases before the highest court that have been subject to 4-4 ties. And without a fully manned Ninth Justice Court, the country is subject to two harmful effects. First, it allows the possibility of conflicts of law that arise between the various federal court of appeals go unresolved by the Supreme Court. Without that tie-breaking function, the application of federal law may differ between, say, California and Texas.
Members, please quiet in the chamber.
Second, it means that important issues of national importance go unresolved. The recent Fredericks case, an attack on labor unions and working people, is an example. Without the finality provided by the High Court, important legal, social, and political questions remain in limbo. I want to be clear. I'm not calling upon the Senate to confirm President Obama's nominee, although I would be pleased with that outcome, obviously. But that is not what AGR 32 is about. All of this resolution is about, it calls on the Senate to do its job. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution empowers the President to nominate among other officials, justices of the Supreme Court with advice and consent of the Senate. The Senate provides neither advice nor consent when it declines to even provide the president's nominee with a Judiciary Committee hearing, never mind a vote on the floor of the Senate. Here are the facts. Multiple justices have been confirmed during an election year, the most recent of which was Justice Anthony Kennedy. And in fact, since 1900, 6 justices have been confirmed during an election year. Since 1875, just after the Civil War, every Supreme Court nominee has received a hearing or a floor vote, except for those where the nomination was withdrawn by the president beforehand. All this resolution does, members, is call upon our U.S. Senate to give the president's nominee a fair hearing and a floor vote. This is the first time in nearly 150 years that the Senate has completely abdicated its constitutional duty. The functionality of the federal government and the integrity of American law should not be held hostage by a group of senators who are putting partisan politics above principle. I respectfully ask for an aye vote and to tell the U.S. Senate to do its job.
Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do rise in opposition for a number of reasons. One, the resolution is silly. The mere idea that Republicans in the Senate will care what Democrats, the Senate of the United States will care what Democrats in the California Assembly say ought be done is in and of itself laughable. More importantly, though, the resolution just starts from an absolutely false premise, that the Senate needs to do its duty and hold hearings. Let's be honest. There's absolutely no requirement in the United States Constitution for the Senate to have any particular procedure as to how it exercises the advice and consent role. In fact, we have seen throughout the history of this country numerous times when the Senate has simply refused to hold hearings. For example, the 102nd Senate, under the control of Democrats, failed to hold hearings 52 times for Republican presidential nominations. This is from a nonpartisan source, the Congressional Research Service. Similarly, when the Democrats held the Senate for the 110th Congress, there were 31 times they simply failed to hold hearings for Republican nominations. Lest you think this is a partisan speech, it's not. In the 106th Congress, there were 40 times the Republicans refused to hold hearings to confirm or deny a Democrat president's nominations. It's politics, because our founders wisely left the selection process to the political branches. The Constitution never says how those political branches have to exercise their duties. And this is as old as the Republic. We hear about the Justice Kennedy nomination. Well, the last time a nomination happened during an election year was Justice Kennedy. Wrong. The vacancy did not occur during an election year. The vacancy occurred a year or more before Justice Kennedy's nomination. It was not an election year. It was only because of the way the Democrats handled the nomination process that time that it got kicked into an election cycle. Let's take a look back at history. As far back as the John Quincy Adams era, the time of the founders, John Crittenden was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court by President Adams. The Senate never held a hearing. There are a number of additional examples through history. Some of my favorite. Remember Justice Edward Bradford? You don't, because he never made it to the Supreme Court. The president nominated him. The Democrats who controlled the Senate, this is about 1840-something, the Democrats held no hearing. So the president nominated George Badger. You don't know about him as on a Supreme Court because he never got there, because there was no action on his nomination by the Democrats. Why? They were waiting for the election to get their own guy. But Fillmore didn't give up. He nominated William Meekow. who you also never heard of on the Supreme Court, because the Democrats held no hearing for him either, waiting for their guy to win the presidency, which of course then happened, and their nomination made it. Current Vice President Biden, when he was in the Senate, said on the floor of the Senate should not act during the election year. He was speaking in 1992. If the president nominates in violation of, quote, long-standing custom, if the president in violation of long-standing custom nominates a Supreme Court justice in the middle of an election. That was Vice President Biden in 1992. We had a filibuster of Justice Alito's nomination. A filibuster. No
30
vote.
seconds, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No vote. Who supported the filibuster? Vice President Biden. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Leahy. The junior senator from Illinois, Mr. Obama. The fact of the matter is, this resolution starts from a false premise. It is historically inaccurate. It is historically
5 seconds.
It is historically illiterate, and you bring no credit on this House for supporting something that is so wrong-headed. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Chu, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the author for this measure. I actually think this measure is important, and I know that while there might be some folks on the other side of the aisle who may not think that the California legislature's opinion on this matters or the perspective of Californians matter, there's a recent poll, NBC Wall Street poll, that showed that 2/3 of Americans, of those who actually have an opinion on this matter, believe there ought to at least be consideration at this time on this. And since the nomination several months back, the rise in this number has been from Republican voters on the other side of the aisle who believe that we need to at least make a decision on this question. As some of you know, I worked as a lawyer, a Democratic counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee in the 1990s at a time when Merrick Garland's initial appointment was being held up by folks on the other side of the aisle. We all know the end of that story. Not only was he confirmed, but our friends on the other side have stated time after time again how qualified he is. And if I could just quote from Senator Orrin Hatch, who was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee at the time, not only is Merrick Garland highly qualified to sit on the circuit, I not only believe he is a fine nominee, but he is as good as Republicans can expect. I would place him at the top of this list. Chuck Grassley, again from the other side of the aisle. Mr. Garland is well qualified and would make a good judge in some other court. Mr. Jeff Sessions, he would be a very good person to fill this position. I'd be very comfortable supporting him for another judgeship. We heard a little bit about some question about whether the U.S. Constitution, what it calls for. The U.S. Senate has a very unique constitutional obligation not given to any other legislative body in the United States. Spelled out in Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Senate is obliged to provide the President with its advice and possibly its consent on this very particular area of government. We're not asking for the U.S. Senate to necessarily confirm Mr. Garland. We're simply asking for a vote. And that, colleagues, is why I respectfully ask for your support for this important measure.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Alejo, would you like to... Oh, Ms. Weber, you're recognized.
Speaker and members, I too rise in support of AJR 32. And I don't rise as a lawyer. I was married to one, and so that doesn't mean I have any respect for him. But nonetheless, I rise as a person who has been made to, who was made to believe at some point that this was a system of three branches, and that I held in, as a child and as a young person, I held in extreme reverence for the Supreme Court. We all do. We look forward to their decisions. We believe that those who enter the Supreme Court are people who, regardless of what their political background may be, have a tremendous respect for the Constitution. And I can remember as a child studying about Justice Warren because of all the things that he did and how he was really a very conservative governor. And everyone expected him to do something different than what he did when it came to Brown versus Board of Education and a host of other laws that took place. And what happened, however, was because of his commitment to the Constitution and his commitment to making sure that the democracy of this country would survive and that it would have the right balance between the judiciary and the executive branch, and he would be a part of the arbiter between those two branches, that he basically made great decisions that we all benefit from right now. And as I listen to the conversation in the nation and I listen to the conversation on this floor, we have a tendency to almost devalue the Supreme Court because we want it to fit into our view of the world. We want it to reflect what we want rather than what is best for the nation. And that brings me great sadness. It really does. Because I grew up believing that the Supreme Court was this great institution. And that as African Americans, we looked to this institution when we couldn't rely upon states' rights and all those other kinds of things to really make good decisions about the direction we were going. It is imperative, I think, that we call upon the Senate to do its job, to basically hear the case. They don't have to vote for the person because I hope they're voting for the person that they believe will be a good person who will defend the Constitution, as Scalia was. And so, therefore, for that reason, I support this because the more we stall, the more we look at our Supreme Court differently, in my mind, we devalue the very Constitution that it was founded upon, and we devalue the offices that we currently hold. And therefore, I recommend and hope that we will support this resolution, not because we're Democrats, not because we're Republicans, but because we're Americans. Thank you.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Alejo, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I want to reply to my colleague from Irvine, who said that the Senate probably could care less about this and that this resolution was in and of itself laughable. My colleague from Irvine speaks on many issues, and I could care less on many of the comments that he makes, and I find many of the comments he makes laughable, but he has a right to stand up and represent the people of his district, just like we, as a body, as a legislature, have a right to speak up on behalf of the nearly 40 million people that we represent in the state of California, the largest state in our country, and send a message to our 2 federal senators that represent California and to the remaining senators where we stand as a legislative body and asking for the nomination. My colleague from Irvine might find this laughable, but the American people do not. Nearly 2/3 of the American public want the Senate to provide a hearing. And if you want to challenge a president's nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court, the best way to do that is to air it out in a Judiciary Committee hearing, ask the question, air out the views. What is the nominee's positions on legal jurisprudence or the direction of the court? The best way to challenge the president is to give him a hearing. But my friend has his facts wrong. We're talking about Supreme Court nominations, and since 1875, every nominee has been given a hearing for the U.S. Supreme Court, unless they were withdrawn before the hearing took place. From the time that President John Adams appointed John Marshall, who founded much American jurisprudence and the strong concept of federalism, to more recently the appointment of Anthony Kennedy during the last year of President Reagan's presidency. Before that, the year before that, it was Robert Bork who was nominated, and a democratically controlled Senate gave him a full hearing. He was voted down, but he was given a hearing. That was the last time that a president's nominee was turned down for the Supreme Court, but he was given a hearing. So, members, lastly, I want to talk about the Biden concept, because that's false. It was a hypothetical concept. It was meant to urge a moderate candidate that both sides could support. And it was actually Joe Biden, as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who presided over Anthony Kennedy's nomination and eventual appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it was a hypothetical. It was never a real rule, or was never practiced. It was only urged that both sides find a moderate nominee that the Republicans and Democrats could both support. But there is a long history of presidents nominating justices to the Supreme Court during a presidential year. In 1916, President Wilson nominated Justice Louis Brandeis. In in 1940, President Roosevelt nominated Justice Frank Murphy. In 1988, I was stated President Reagan nominated Anthony Kennedy in his final year of his second term as president. But again, I want to reiterate that since 1875, every Supreme Court nominee has received at least a hearing unless the president withdrew the nomination before court. And since 1975, every Supreme Court nominee who is now withdrawn has received a vote in the committee or on the floor within 125 days. Members, I ask you to join me in urging our U.S. senators to do its job, to not abdicate its constitutional obligation, to not engage in dereliction of duty, do the job that the American people are asking it to do, and provide a hearing to President Obama's nominee. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 53, 22 noes. The resolution is adopted. Okay. File item 80, AB 2147, Eggman. Ms. Eggman, you are recognized. Oh, sorry, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2147 by Assemblymember Eggman, enacted relating to vehicles.
Ms. Eggman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I present to you today AB 2147, a bill that gives counties and cities the option without a local ordinance to take part in a vehicle impoundment program using the commission of a crime related to prostitution by a person buying or attempting to buy sexual services. This bill is an addition to current law, which allows impoundment if the offender is involved in a prostitution offense, buyer or seller, if authorized by a local ordinance. California has unfortunately become identified by the Attorney General as one of the top spots for human trafficking in the United States, and this bill provides us with yet one more tool to combat human trafficking that has affected every part of California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Aye 71, no 0. Measure passes. Pass and retain item 81. Pass and retain on files item 81 through 83. Mr. DeBobney, are you prepared to? Hold on. File item 84, AB 1891, DeBobney. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1891 by Assemblymember DeBobney, enacted relating to local government finance.
Mr. DeBobney, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, members, today I rise in Tax Week nonetheless to present AB 1891. This bill simply clarifies the way school districts must process parcel tax exemptions. Under current law, school districts which grant exemptions to seniors based on their age then require the same seniors to file the same paperwork each year, even though their eligibility is unchanged. To address this issue, AB 1891 simply states that once an individual has turned 65 years old and a school district has exempted them from a parcel tax through an application process, that district must honor that exemption for as long as that senior is eligible, which is indefinite. This bill has no opposition. I respectfully ask your aye vote to help clarify and simplify this law for our seniors and taxpayers. Thank you.
Seeing and hearing no debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Aye 75, no 0. The measure passes. File item 85, pass and retain. File item 86, AB 2509, Ting. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2509 by Assemblymember Ting, enacted relating to bicycles.
Mr. Ting, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In honor of Bike to School Week, I'm presenting AB 2509, which allows cyclists to ride side by side on the road or within a bike lane. This is no different than how we treat motorcyclists. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Obolnoti, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, many of you in this chamber know that I am an extremely passionate bicyclist. In fact, I ride a lot. The gentleman from Santee and I did 35 miles last night, in fact, on the American River Bike Trail. I've ridden over 100 miles in the last week. I ride several thousand miles a year. In fact, my wife says, and colleagues, just for the record, I deny this, but she claims that I told her when I was elected to the State Assembly that the best thing about getting elected was that I got to buy another road bike so that I had something to ride here in Sacramento. So you can imagine that I have really passionate feelings about laws that encourage people to take up bicycling and to keep bicyclists safe on the road. And unfortunately, I must rise in opposition to this bill. Let me tell you why. On a good day when I'm riding on a road, I'm traveling between 21 and 23 miles an hour. That's actually pretty fast for a bicycle. It is very slow for a car. The cars that I'm sharing the road with are traveling between 25 and 50 miles an hour, much faster than I am. And the consequences for me of a collision between a car and my bicycle are much greater for me than they are for the car. So not only out of courtesy, but also out of a sense of self-preservation, the best thing for me to do is to be as far to the right side of the road as I possibly can be. This bill would allow bicyclists to travel in tandem side by side on these roads. And although I would love to be able to ride with my colleagues side by side, I fear that we put our bicyclists at much greater risk if we minimize the distance between them and the car. And colleagues, unfortunately, having witnessed this many times, I can tell you from experience that cars are going to pass bicyclists no matter what laws we pass about making it illegal or legal to do so. So although I have a great respect for the author and I am respectful of the motivation behind bringing this bill forward, I must urge a no vote because I fear that in trying to encourage this kind of behavior that we will put a percentage of this population in danger of injury or death. I must urge a no vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Ting, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to reiterate, this does not make it mandatory for cyclists to ride side by side. As my colleague from Big Bear mentioned, again, the cyclists right now must use their judgment when we're on the road. For any of us who ride our bikes on the road, we know that if we get into a collision with the vehicle, we will lose. So I don't think anybody will put themselves purposely in harm's way. All this says is that it allows this to happen. So if you're on an empty road or you are on a road without cars, you can ride side by side and you don't have to fear about being ticketed or being aggressively harassed. So all it does is codify behavior that we've done since we were children. Many of us rode side by side with our friends down the streets when we were children. I don't think that that should be a crime. I think this just says that it allows this to happen. And again, like anything in life, we have to use our judgment. So again, respectfully ask for your aye vote on AB 2509.
With that, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 27. The measure passes. Pass or retain item 87, item 88, AB 2738. Olson, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2738 by Assemblymember Olson and others, enacting to school bonds.
Ms. Olson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today, I'm proud to present AB 2738, a bill that will ensure school bond transparency and responsible use of public funds. When school bonds are approved by voters, it's the obligation of local districts to provide their respective communities with the facilities that they were promised in the bond. In order to build, maintain, and upgrade facilities, it is important that bond proceeds are protected. Traditionally, the public funds used for school bonds are invested in large investment pools that are overseen by county treasurers. Until just recently, nobody had ever questioned the responsibility of the county treasurer to oversee the investment of public funds. But last year, San Mateo Community College District authorized itself to withdraw funds from the county treasurer, establish surplus funds for investment on the open market, and then use bond proceeds to cover the cost of that investment. This series of actions creates a dangerous precedent for school districts across the state. If an investment loss were to occur, inadequate funding would delay necessary school maintenance and upgrades. Voters would also be more reluctant to pass future school bond measures. AB 2738 will bring clarity to the law by prohibiting school districts from withdrawing from the county treasury in order to invest public dollars on the open market. We must respect the will of the voters and ensure that bonds are spent for their intended purposes. And we also must continue providing our children with safe and well-maintained educational environments. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 69, noes 2. The measure passes. File item 89, AB 2562, Committee on Veterans Affairs by Irwin. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2562 by the Committee on Veterans Affairs, an act relating to military service.
Ms. Irwin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker and members. AB 2562 is a committee bill that will clarify existing language regarding reservists called to active duty by removing an obsolete reference to a past date. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 77, no 0. The measure passes. Pass and retain on the remaining items. We'll move to the consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second-day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 1943 by Assemblymember Linder and others, an act relating to vehicles.
The clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted. We'll defer reading them to the bills on the consent calendar till the end. We will now move to announcements and adjourns in memories. The following members were granted prior permission to speak on adjourn in memory. Assemblymember Chang. Assemblymember Chang, you're recognized.
Members, I rise to adjourn in memory of Gregory Gillespie, a beloved Vietnam War veteran of Yorba Linda, California. Gregory tragically passed on April 9th at 70 years old after being struck by a suspected drunk driver. He is survived by his wife, Betty, their 5 children, 11 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Gregory was known around our community for his dedication and servitude to the U.S. military. In 2013, he led a campaign to make Yorba Linda a red shirt city, which honors veterans and deployed personnel by wearing the color red every Friday. Because of Gregory's efforts, Yorba Linda became the first city in California to officially honor veterans in this way. His passion for life touched many individuals in my district, and while we were deeply saddened to hear the news of his passing, Gregory's legacy will live on and forever be remembered in the hearts of our great state. Please join me in adjourning in memory of Gregory.
Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request unanimous consent to return to the back of the file and hear file item 93.
Without objection, file item 93, AB 1970, Lowe. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1970 by Assemblymember Lowe and others, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Each year, more and more voters are choosing to cast their vote with a vote by mail ballot. In 2012, for the first time in a statewide general election, more than 50% of California voters cast their votes with a vote by mail ballot. Assembly Bill 1970 will require the Secretary of State to draft regulations to establish guidelines for county elections officials and create uniformity in processing vote by mail ballots. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay. Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 48, noes 24. The measure passes. Moving to announcements, member, the following committees will meet upon adjournment: Agriculture, Room 124; Banking and Finance, Room 447; Human Services, Rules Committee Room; Judiciary, Room 126; Privacy and Consumer Protections, room 444. Utilities and Commerce, room 4202. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, April 22nd, no check-in session, no floor session. Monday, April 25th, floor session at 1 p.m. Rev and Tax, meeting in room 437. And for clarification, Agriculture will be in room 127. Should just go. Clerk will read the remaining consent calendar items.
Assembly Bill 1593.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1650.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1769.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1776.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1797.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1811.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1829.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1845.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1849.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1894.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1900 with urgency.
I-76 no zero on the urgency. And I-76 no zero on the bill.
Assembly Bill 1918.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 1962.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2053.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2093.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2219.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2254.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2259.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2273.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2274.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2505.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2563.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2637.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2780.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2884.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2886.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2116.
I-76 no zero.
Assembly Bill 2457.
I-76 no zero.
And Senate Bill 269 with urgency.
I-76 no zero on the urgency. I-76 no zero on the bill. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no business, I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves. Ms. Waldron seconds that this House stands in adjournment until Monday, April 25th at 1 p.m. Court call is lifted.